April 7th, 1945. The largest battleship ever built is steaming toward Okinawa with fuel loaded for a one-way trip. 9 main guns, each muzzle just over 18 inches across, the biggest ever mounted on any warship in history. And in almost 4 years of war, those guns have fired at an enemy ship on exactly one morning. Every ship on this list gets judged the way she is about to be, by what she actually changed about the war, weighed against what she cost to build, to crew, and to lose. Judged that way, the most famous battleship on Earth finishes dead last. And the ship at number 1 ends the war patched, scorched, and flying a homemade banner with her own name on it. 9 ships, worst to best, starting now. 9th place, the Yamato, the giant that history kept in a drawer. Understand what she was first, because the engineering deserves it. Around 72,000 tons at full load, turret faces, carrying more than 2 feet of steel, built in secrecy so complete that Japan hid her true size from its own public. On paper, no ship afloat could beat her in a straight fight. And that is exactly why Japan never let her have one. She was too precious to risk and too thirsty to sail, so she sat at anchor while the carriers she was built to protect burned. Her main guns engaged enemy ships once, off Samar in October 1944, where her shells helped send an escort carrier under, a ship a fraction of her size. Before her force turned away from a fight, it was winning. 6 months later, she sailed for Okinawa on that one-way fuel load and never got there. American carrier aircraft, hundreds of them, put her on the bottom in an afternoon. More than 3,000 men went down with her, and fewer than 300 came out of the water. All that steel, all that budget, could have built the escorts and the aircraft Japan actually ran out of. If the Yamato proves that size buys nothing by itself, the next ship proves that even fame has an expiry date. 8th place, HMS Hood. For 20 years, she was the most famous warship on Earth. The mighty Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, sent around the world between the wars to remind everyone who owned the sea. As a symbol, she worked. Deterrence made of steel and shine. But the ship under the paint was a battlecruiser laid down with 1916 thinking, protection sacrificed for speed, and the deep refit that might have fixed her kept getting postponed because she was always needed somewhere. The bill came due in the Denmark Strait on May 24th, 1941. Minutes into her duel with Bismarck, a shell reached a magazine, and the most famous warship on Earth broke in half and was gone in about 3 minutes. 3 men survived out of more than 1,400. Judged by this list's standard, 20 years of reputation converted into 8 minutes of war. And the ship that killed her stands exactly 1 rung higher, because glory has an exchange rate too. 7th place, the Bismarck. Credit first, because it is real. In her one battle, she shot fast and straight, killed the pride of the Royal Navy in minutes, and absorbed a pounding at the end that proved German shipbuilders knew their trade. But look at what this list measures. Her entire fighting career lasted 9 days. Her actual mission was commerce raiding, strangling the Atlantic convoys, and her lifetime tonnage of merchant shipping sunk is 0. A single hit in that first battle opened her fuel bunkers and canceled the raid before it started. Then a swordfish, a canvas-winged biplane that looked like it belonged in the previous war, dropped 1 torpedo into her rudders, and the Royal Navy caught her and wrecked her on May 27th. Out of a crew over 2,000, barely more than 100 survived. Germany traded its biggest, most expensive warship for 1 elderly battlecruiser and a week of headlines. The next 2 ships are where reputation and results come apart completely. One is remembered for dying and deserves better. The other hurt the Allies more by sitting still than Bismarck did by sailing. 6th place, HMS Prince of Wales. She gets remembered for how she died, which buries what she did. At the Denmark Strait, she was so new that civilian dockyard technicians were still aboard, working on her malfunctioning turrets in the middle of the battle. Untested, half-ready, watching Hood explode a few thousand yards away, she still put a shell into Bismarck that opened those fuel bunkers. That hit is what forced Bismarck to run for France instead of the convoy lanes, and running for France is what got her killed. 3 months later, this same ship carried Winston Churchill across the Atlantic to meet Roosevelt and sign the Atlantic Charter. Then, in December 1941, she was sent to Singapore without air cover, and Japanese aircraft found her and Repulse off Malaya and sank them both in open water, the first capital ships ever lost at sea to aircraft alone, with around 840 men between them. Here is the uncomfortable part. That sinking changed naval warfare more than most ships' entire careers. It ended the battleship's claim to rule the sea in a single morning. Her sister ship's killer watched all of this from a fjord in Norway and drew the obvious conclusion: never come out at all. 5th place, the Tirpitz, Bismarck's sister, and the strangest entry on this list, because in her whole career, she fired her main guns at the enemy exactly once, at a coal mining settlement on Spitsbergen. And she still ranks above ships that fought. Parked in the Norwegian fjords, she was a loaded gun pointed at every Arctic convoy, and the Royal Navy had to keep battleships and carriers at readiness for years, tied to the mere possibility of her sailing. In July 1942, a report that she might have put to sea was enough to make the Admiralty scatter convoy PQ-17, and U-boats and aircraft then destroyed 24 of its 35 merchant ships. She gutted a convoy without raising anchor. Sinking her took years of effort, midget submarines crawling under her nets, repeated carrier strikes, and finally, in November 1944, Lancaster bombers with 5-ton earthquake bombs that rolled her over at her mooring with around 1,000 men inside the hull. Measured in enemy effort consumed per ton of steel, she might be the most efficient ship Germany built. But a ship that only threatens can delay a war. It cannot win one. From here up, every ship on this list cashed its check in actual combat. The next one did it in about 7 minutes. 4th place, USS Washington. The night of November 14th, 1942, off Guadalcanal, is the whole argument. The campaign hung on whether Japan could run battleships down the slot and shell Henderson Field Flat. In pitch darkness, with her escorting destroyers burning and the battleship South Dakota lit up and electrically blind beside her, Washington did something no ship had really done before: fought an entire gunnery duel by radar. Admiral Willis Lee's gunners tracked the battleship Kirishima on their screens and hit her again and again with 16-inch shells, somewhere between 9 and 20 times in roughly 7 minutes. The count is still argued. The result is not. Kirishima was on the bottom by morning. Washington came through the battle essentially untouched, and Japan never again sent battleships to contest those waters. One night's work, one capital ship killed, a campaign tipped, at a cost to herself of almost nothing. On this list's math, that is close to a perfect score. Number 3 is the smallest ship here, a quarter the length of the Yamato, and she is on the podium because of what happened the morning they met. 3rd place, USS Johnston, a Fletcher-class destroyer. About 2,700 tons full load against opponents that outweighed her 25 times over. Off Samar on October 25th, 1944, a Japanese force built around battleships and heavy cruisers, Yamato among them, surprised the escort carriers of Taffy 3, ships with no armor and no guns that mattered. Commander Ernest Evans did not wait for orders. He swung Johnston around, laid smoke across the water, and charged the Japanese line alone. Her torpedoes blew the bow off the heavy cruiser Kumano. Then she stayed in the fight with 5-inch guns against battleship armor, drawing fire away from the carriers until the shells finally stopped her. She went down with 186 of her 327 men, Evans among them, and survivors in the water reported a Japanese destroyer captain saluting her as she sank. The charge she led and the air attacks around it convinced the Japanese commander to turn away from the invasion shipping at Leyte. Measured in outcome per ton, nothing else in this ranking comes close. In 2021, she was found again, more than 6,400 meters down. At the time, the deepest shipwreck ever surveyed, her hull number still readable on the bow. 2 ships left. One is the oldest thing on this list. The other outfought an entire navy. Second place, HMS Warspite. Launched in 1913, she fought at Jutland in the First World War, where her helm jammed and she circled helplessly under the fire of the German fleet, and survived even that. By 1939, she was old, and then she went and became the most decorated ship in the history of the Royal Navy. At Narvik in April 1940, she led destroyers into a Norwegian fjord, and by the end of the day, every German destroyer there, 8 of them, was destroyed, with her own float plane sinking a U-boat along the way. At Matapan in 1941, her 15-inch broadsides, fired at point-blank range in the dark, helped wipe out 2 Italian heavy cruisers in minutes. Off Salerno in 1943, she was hit by a Fritz X, a radio-guided German bomb, a weapon from the next era of warfare, took on thousands of tons of water, and lived to bombard the Normandy beaches the following summer. She carried more battle honors than any other individual ship in the Royal Navy. And in 1947, under tow to the breakers, she broke loose and ran herself aground on the Cornish coast, as if she refused to go quietly. 30 years of war, and she showed up for all of it. Only one ship beats a record like that, and she did it by holding the entire Pacific line almost alone. First place, USS Enterprise. 20 battle stars, the most decorated American warship of the war. And the ranking here is not sentiment. It is arithmetic. At Midway in June 1942, her dive bombers helped shatter 2 Japanese fleet carriers in the space of minutes, and later helped finish a third, the single sharpest reversal of the Pacific War. She fought at the Eastern Solomons and took bomb hits. She fought at Santa Cruz and took more. And when that battle ended, with Hornets sunk and every other American fleet carrier in the Pacific sunk or under repair, Enterprise was the line. Repair crews sailed with her into the naval battles off Guadalcanal, welding her back together between airstrikes, while her crew hung a banner that read, "Enterprise versus Japan." That was not a joke. For a stretch of late 1942, it was roughly the situation. She was still there at Leyte, at Iwo Jima, at Okinawa, where a kamikaze blew her forward elevator hundreds of feet into the air, and she survived that too. The Yamato was preserved and achieved almost nothing. The Enterprise was risked constantly and helped decide everything. That is the entire criterion in one sentence. And the ending has no mercy in it. In 1958, she went to the scrapyard anyway, over the protests of the men who fought her, leaving nothing behind but a name the US Navy has kept giving to its newest carriers ever since. So look at what this ranking actually says about the war at sea. It was never decided by armor belts and gun tables. Steel only counted when a navy was willing to spend it. The giants that were hoarded like treasure, Yamato swinging at anchor, Tirpitz hiding in her fjord, bought their nation's delay and nothing else. The ships that won were the ones spent freely at the point of decision. An old battleship in a fjord, a destroyer charging a battle line, a carrier held together by welders in a combat zone. The side that treated warships as instruments beat the side that treated them as monuments. If Yamato at the bottom made you angry, good, the comment box is right there. Make the case. Because this is a small channel and we read every single one. Subscribe if you want more of these. And if the Johnston got to you, you should know the destroyers are getting a whole video of their own. Next, every famous class, ranked. Thanks for watching.